Thank you, Moss Adams, for sponsoring our candidate Q&A series. Rob and Ryan, you are both partners at Moss Adams and work adjacent to economic development. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
This month, I sat down with Tina Kotek, Betsy Johnson, and Christine Drazen to discuss their views on the Portland region, business attraction, incentives, and land use, all economic development issues of importance to Greater Portland, Inc., the region's only public-private organization dedicated to attracting, expanding, and retaining traded sector businesses. Today, I'd like to get your thoughts on their response. So let's just jump right in. Portland livability. You both are part of the Greater Portland business community. Anything that stood out in their response? Did you walk away feeling encouraged?
Yeah, Monique, I'll start. Thank you for the question and this opportunity. And I'll just start by saying I'm a lifelong resident of Oregon. I currently live in Northwest Portland, and so this topic is personal to me, but it's personal to everyone. And downtown Portland is not as attractive as it used to be. I'm a runner. I've ran downtown for 20 years, and now I don't. So what stood out to me is both Drazen and Johnson specifically mentioning the plan to revisit Measure 110. They believe homelessness and trash in the city has a lot to do with decriminalization of drugs and has contributed to our homelessness situation in Portland. Kotek did not mention Measure 110, but acknowledged homelessness, drugs, and crime need attention. All parties mentioned our housing problem. Kotek mentioned land use and low-income housing as priorities, as did the other candidates. I did walk away feeling encouraged, though, as all three candidates feel strongly about needing to clean up our streets and address homelessness. I like Drazen's referencing the city. Its decline is reversible and appeared to show confidence to bring it back. I also liked hearing about Johnson's work with Wapato and repurposing the jail for people in transition and the Helping Hands organization. To me, it seemed all three candidates have Portland livability as a priority to them as governor.
Thanks, Rob. I'm similarly situated. I've been a lifelong resident of Oregon, and I've worked in the downtown Portland area for the past 18 years now. Sadly, downtown Portland is not the place it used to be. And I think we've all seen where it's been overtaken by crime, homelessness, trash, and graffiti and whatnot. I was encouraged to hear all three of the candidates speak to these issues and provide their detailed plans for improving the livability of Portland and frankly for the entire state, which will benefit all of us. The decline is reversible. The candidates spoke to that, but it will take a committed investment on the part of the state and local government and the business community as well. It's refreshing to see the desire on the part of all three candidates to really take action and get it right.
I'm glad you two both walked away encouraged. I too felt encouraged when talking to all three women. So economic priorities, what impressed you? Anything you heard, anything you would have liked to hear?
Yeah, so I'll start with kind of what we heard, and Ryan will hit what we'd like to hear. And I'll start first with Johnson. What I heard from her is, and a lot of them had similar messages, but specifically she was focused on cleaning up the streets, reducing crime, affordable housing, and making Oregon livable again. And she wants to change Oregon's attitude towards business, and that we're here to help our companies and reduce regulations that impede their growth. She wants more economic development tools, functioning schools, spoke about listening to companies threatening to leave and helping improve the business climate in Oregon by reviewing existing regulations and making it easier to operate in Oregon, as well as easier to relocate or expand here from somewhere else. She showed a lot of passion here and a get it done attitude. It was very refreshing hearing her thoughts. When I listened to Kotek, she talked about some of the same things, addressing labor shortages in our workforce, affordable housing, workforce housing, land use, and financing solutions to assist with growth and expansion of the companies that are here. I liked really hearing about the apprenticeship idea and programs and the upskill training of our workforce in partnership with our community colleges. And she also spoke about childcare solutions for working parents. Moving over to Drazen, she discussed needing fresh leadership over all agency heads and pausing on any new regulation unless it related to public health.
Now to turn, I guess, to the other side of the coin, there was a few things that we felt could have been touched on that would have been helpful to hear more about. One thing in particular, it would have been nice to hear more about the budgetary constraints of our state. And our state, both at the local and at the state level, there's been a number of tax changes where there's been a significant increase of revenue. But it would have been nice to hear about government programs that maybe aren't necessary at this point and could be cut. Specifically, it would have been good to hear the candidates touch on really the large one, PERS, and to talk about their plans there as to how that could economically impact the state. It would have been nice to hear them speak a bit more on infrastructure. I don't believe any of the candidates spoke specifically to the interstate bridge project or other critical, what I would call hard infrastructure type projects, and how that could help to boost economic output of our state. And then lastly, our state has been blessed with significant revenue, and it would have been nice to hear the candidates speak to how they would put that revenue to use, and with investments that would be critical to social, economic, and business programs within the state.
Yeah, you two are on it. I think the infrastructure is huge, right? We know what the bridge means to the region, what it means to the state, but then the trickle down effect, the impact that has on people, businesses, moving goods back and forth, and even DEI, right? That bridge is important for people who need it most if they have to get to work, right? And it's important that we improve it. Business attraction, retention, and expansion is something near and dear to Greater Portland Inc. Who do you think shined here?
I'll start on this one again, and I'll start with Johnson. She wants to work with business, and I love the way she said this, that she's going to have the top 30 CEOs on speed dial, and then followed that by saying she felt that the legislature, has been anti-business for too long and showed a lot of passion to fix this as governor. She wants to change the attitude towards business, restore our reputation in the business community, and make Oregon an attractive place for business and expansion. To me, she came off incredibly strong and passionate on this topic, and shared many stories of her experience in helping with economic development in her roles in both the House and the Senate. I appreciated how direct and honest she was about the importance of a governor's role and relationship with business, and specifically corporations, which sometimes is a bad word in Oregon. And she promised to pick up the damn phone.
And that she did, Rob. And with that, we can transition to Drazen. And Drazen, I felt, touched on really a lot of the high qualities that Oregon already brings to the table. We have a great quality of life, low cost of energy, a strong workers' comp system, which all of that should help to attract additional business and investment in the state. Drazen referenced building on this by improving our regulatory system, as well as the tax structure. I like that Drazen wanted to play a more active role and go on offense with business recruitment rather than playing defense, as we've seen as of late with Intel specifically. She really wants to be an active recruiter for businesses and to improve our economic development tools to attract new business to our economy here in Oregon. For Tina Kotek, she really didn't give a whole lot of detail on this topic, and she really spent her time talking about and focusing upon how as a state we need to provide more services to support the public needs, as well as listening to businesses that are here and what their needs are, as well as implementing plans for them to access necessary capital. It was hard to get to the specifics of what she was referencing, so it would have been good to have her speak more concretely on this topic in particular.
I'm going to push back a little. I thought she actually shined there, and the examples she gave, they were based on her experience. And to me, it shows that, again, she's an experienced candidate in this area. She traveled, I believe, to China to recruit businesses. And she used some other experience to say, hey, I can transfer that to this area as well. And to me, it just seemed that she would rely on her experience as a representative in recruiting, not necessarily, again, the hard, concrete answers that Drazen and Johnson provided. So taxes and incentives. I know this is Moss Adams' bread and butter with the two of you. Is there anything that you liked or disliked?
Yeah, and I can kick this one off with Drazen. Drazen was very clear in her response to taxes. And this, I think, will certainly resonate with the business community. She clearly stated that she would veto any new tax proposals and wants to pursue a plan to reduce regulatory costs to business. She also indicated she can develop the relationships as the governor to pass significant legislation and reference the Semiconductor Task Force and its recommendations. It was clear from our perspective that she read and supported it. She referenced its recommendations on regulatory uncertainty, land use, and lack of incentives. To me, she didn't come off quite as strong on her ability to develop the relationships necessary to pass major tax legislation, but it was clear that it was a strong priority of hers.
Yeah, and I'll pivot to Kotek. She discussed her experience as speaker and I believe for 9 years now, and believes that she does have the political capital to pass significant legislation. And I likely agree she does. As an example, she referenced her work on the Student Success Act, which of course brought Oregon the corporate activity tax to support schools. What she wasn't clear to me on is whether she believes economic incentives are needed to attract and retain business in Oregon. She did reference the Semiconductor Task Force report, but she didn't share any details of supporting its recommendations that I could hear. As far as Johnson, she came off really confident that she has the political capital to move significant tax legislation. It was also clear that she read the Semiconductor Task Force report and supports its recommendation. It appears to me she could be successful in passing major tax legislation as governor.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you two more, for sure. Land use, it's our last question. What do you see as each candidate's strength as it relates to land use, site readiness?
Yeah, I can kick this one off. From a broad-based perspective, I guess I'll start with this caveat that I'm not a land use policy expert, but what was clear to me was that all of the candidates recognize that something needs to be done to improve our land use policies to better support the retention and attraction of business to the state. The candidates also were clear, in their discussion that it needs to be a balanced approach that really takes into consideration all public and private constituents that would benefit from an improved land use policy. Rob, I'll turn it to you to talk specifically to the candidates.
Yeah, and I'm going to also share my same comment that I am not an expert, but I'll share with what we observed. Johnson, has been participatory in land use planning in her district for many years. She spoke at length regarding her public-private partnership with OMIC and the success that OMIC and GPI, has had at attracting both domestic and international businesses to the state. And she also went out of her way to compliment the work GPI is doing. And if it weren't there, she would invent it. Kotek has similar experience in her district. She indicated we need to focus on future expansion, outside the metro area, which was kind of an interesting thought. And because we have, limited industrial land in the metro area, and she thought there was an opportunity in Oregon's South Coast. She did come off very knowledgeable on the topic and spoke about supersiding laws, which was, new to me and that we have on the books and how that might be able to speed development. She also referenced her experience in representing in North and Northeast Portland, including the Port of Portland, which includes the airport. As for Drazen, I think she really focused on that there's a conversation that's necessary to be had and that it hasn't been had for over 50 years, and believes our land use system is broken. She did commit to support both the ag and farming community as well as the manufacturing community and to strike a balance between the both to support growth in Oregon. What we didn't hear is about specific experience or policies that Drazen would have though around land use.
Yeah, land use is a hard nut to crack. And so I think the candidates each gave the best response that they could in their willingness to really figure it out. So that concludes the questions that I asked the candidates, and I want to get your thoughts on what is one word that best describes each nominee's response?
Yeah, and I can start here. We'll start with Kotek. The word that Rob and I selected for Kotek is servant. She clearly presented a desire to help all Oregonians wherever they are and whatever economic situation they find themselves in. We see her as being consistent with the current administration, as we see a lot of similar policy positions and objectives.
And then I'll talk about the one word for Johnson. Our one word for Johnson is passion. She spoke with so much passion on these topics and had really good ideas while bringing all of her experience to the table.
And then lastly, for Drazen, our word for Drazen is change. We heard that she believes we need to change course and stop and start doing things in Oregon to achieve her vision. And she was very clear as to her articulation of what that change would need to be.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Rob, for today, for sharing your thoughts. I'll close with this. Decisions by top state leaders have impacts for years, sometimes domino effects that aren't always immediately apparent. In the same way, inaction can have long-term consequences. This election year, we need leaders who will set us up for success when it comes to land use, policy, taxes, incentives, and livability issues. We all have issues that are personally important to us that influence us when we vote. Economic development is just one of those areas of concern. When you vote this November, consider each of these candidates through the lens of economic development, through the lens of opportunity, and through the lens of issues that are close and near and dear to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monique.